Billy Howell, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, and Robert the Bruce himself, Chris Pine. Unfortunately, Florence Pugh, who complements this amazing cast of what was once hairy men, and now they're all very tidy. I'm the only one, well, James and I are the only one holding the lengthy stuff. But Florence can't be here, unfortunately. So, she sends her best to everyone.
So thank you guys so much for being here. We've got time for a couple of questions. So, David, I know this is a project that you've been it's been gestating with you for a while. You've been thinking about doing it. When did you start thinking about it? And can you talk a little bit about that moment when you knew you had to
It's, Robert's story is a story that hasn't properly been told in cinema. He was touched upon in a movie 20 years ago, Braveheart, which occupies a similar period. In a way that the story of Robert was sort of eclipsed by the story of that movie, and the facts of the matter were that glorious, heroic failure that William Wallace was. Robert the Bruce was the guy who kind of got things done and used a combination of politics and guile and force and hearts and mind to coordinate his attempt to try and deal with what was then a sort of totally an occupation and an attempt to subsume a whole country into Edward I's sense of what he wanted. He already had Wales and he wanted to get Scotland and just kind of contain the whole island. He basically just removed the regalia of the Scottish crown. The stone of the traditional stone was taken away, and there was nothing left. And the story starts with this, the complete surrender of everyone in Scotland, and the story of Robert kind of continues from there. So that it's something that hasn't probably been told before. It felt like something that I've always wanted to do. It's a small confession, but I'm related to him, but that's a minor thing. The opportunity came along to finance a big scale production of this story, and we took advantage of it and had fantastic creative freedom in the hands of Netflix. And Gillian was able to produce the film the way that she wanted to produce it, and I was able to direct it the way I wanted to direct it. And I had an amazing cast who embodied all these incredible characters with gusto and beautiful performances.
Well, your last film is a film of scale in terms of the landscapes, but this one, in terms of technical, you're tackling so many things that I haven't seen in your films before. How much was that a challenge for you as a filmmaker? Horses and armour and big fight scenes?
Enormous challenge to juggle a huge ensemble cast and often on horses, in amongst real kind of environmental elements, mud and rain and wind and so on, and just to try and tell the story on as grand a scale as possible, but also trying to be as authentic to medieval life as possible, which is not necessarily how the mythology kind of goes. Medieval life was not necessarily that grand, or not. It was tough, and the attempts that we made to try and make that as real as possible, and particularly including all the performances and all the interaction in the cast, is me sort of trying to take some of the techniques I guess I've learned from smaller films and trying to apply it on a bigger scale, which is there's a lot more moving parts, and trying to keep the essence of it being fresh and alive at the same time as all those moving parts being spun, displayed. It's quite challenging.
And Gillian, so talking about scale, this is a massive film for you to produce, but I've also read that this is for you a love letter to Scotland. Can you talk about those two elements of having produced this?
Absolutely, Trisha. You chose your words wisely there. You said love letter rather than petition. I'm thankful for that. I've been making films in Scotland for over 20 years, 25 I think with David, and it was actually not too difficult given that I was surrounded by such a wonderful bunch of people.
And Aaron, your character is a very incredibly physical performance. Can you talk about how David briefed you on this and how you guys got to your performance?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a very physical, challenging journey, and a psychological one as well. I think, when you're dealing with, this sort of the historical events, and these sort of these characters were, they were historical, and then there's a lot to research and to work from there. So, and it's extremely rich with a lot of, kind of Shakespearean in its way, a lot of tragedy and betrayal, and we had a fantastic ensemble to play in that world. And I think there's challenges all the time. We had a great boot camp at the beginning where we had horse riding. We got to bond all together, so we get to know one another. But we had to look like we live on those horses, and be able to ride one hand and swing a sword above our head and make it look believable. But I think what Mackenzie does brilliantly, and you'll see these landscapes, you'll see it's stunning. But I think he creates these authentic environments that we as actors get to absorb and play in, and we sort of channel that time spiritually, and hopefully you'll get to see that.
And Chris, you said earlier that even though we've got a film of grand scale, that David creates this sort of jazz environment for you guys as actors. Can you talk a little bit about that, but also about Robert LeBruce and how much you had to do to sort of understand him from a historical perspective to play the role?
I guess what I enjoy about David, and I guess filmmaking for me right now and telling stories, is I have a greater confidence in someone who says "I don't know" when asked the question versus some sort of stern, authoritarian, focused directive. Because I think the "I don't know" of the scene leaves room to play many, many different colors, which is to me life, full of varied and often disparate, contradictory motivations and reasoning. For me, Bruce, obviously there's going to be comparisons to Braveheart. To have the amount of money we did to make a film on this scale, to tell I guess by some definition, a Hollywood, traditional Hollywood sword and sandal epic, but with David behind the lens, giving that kind of freedom for exploration. So while this has all of the genetic components of a huge, grand, kind of Hollywood moralistic tale between good and evil, I think what he allowed me to embody with the lead character is someone way more opaque and way more difficult to discern in regards to motivation, who this man is, than often is found in many narrative storytelling. I mean, the archetype that I think was embodied by Mel Gibson in Braveheart, again, which obviously we keep on coming back to. There's a monochromism to which obviously suits some people. You can hurrah and get all jingoistic about it, but this man, with all the research that we did, is very, very difficult. He's Machiavellian by some terms, tender by others. He's selfless, he's selfish, he's weak, he's a man, he's a human. He's very, very flawed. And I think many people will hopefully be able to take many different interpretations of who this man is. He's not easy to pin down. So I think it makes good meditative filmmaking on a scale where usually it's just handed you on a plate, and David does not like to do that. So David likes to give you something to think about, to mold, to ponder, to grapple with, and to do that in this beautiful, beautiful set and scope, I think is very, very unique and very powerful.
Well, it's a really wonderful ensemble piece. Congratulations to David and Gillian and the whole cast and crew.
Do you think we should give the legend James Cosmo the microphone?
So Robert.
That's because I asked David, please don't ask me any questions. Just to say it was such an honour to be, when I was an awful lot younger, 25 years ago, I was in Braveheart, and I never thought there'd be another film that embraced Scotland so much. I believe this will. I'm just very grateful that I stayed around long enough to work with David Mackenzie.
Thank you.
Thank you.